Powerful millionaire can't resist his loyal nanny and faces a desire that could destroy his family. Sebastian stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse in downtown Seattle, watching the morning fog roll over Elliott Bay. The coffee in his sterling silver mug had gone cold 20 minutes ago, but he hadn't noticed. His attention was entirely captured by the soft melody drifting from the kitchen, where Clara Dawson was preparing breakfast for his 6-year-old daughter, Lila. 2 years. It had been exactly 2 years since Evangeline's funeral, and Sebastian had convinced himself he'd mastered the art of existing without truly living. His days were structured like his business deals, methodical, efficient, emotionless. Wake at 5:30 a.m., review the Tokyo markets, conference call with London by 6:45, and arrive at Langford Engineering's headquarters by 8 Montreux sharp. But Clara's presence had a way of disrupting even his most carefully constructed routines. "Daddy!" Lila's voice broke through his thoughts as she bounded into the living room, her auburn curls, so much like her mother's, bouncing with each step. "Clara made pancakes shaped like butterflies." Sebastian turned from the window, forcing his mouth into what he hoped resembled a smile. "Did she now?" His voice carried the same measured tone he used in boardrooms, but Lila didn't seem to mind. She was already tugging at his charcoal suit jacket, trying to pull him toward the kitchen. "She said butterflies bring good luck on Mondays," Lila continued, her small hand slipping into his much larger one. "Do you think that's true, Daddy?" Before Sebastian could formulate an appropriately logical response, Clara appeared in the doorway. She wore simple dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater, her chestnut hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Nothing about her appearance should have made Sebastian's breath catch in his throat, yet it did. "Good morning, Mr. Langford," Clara said, her voice carrying that same gentle warmth that had first convinced him to hire her 3 years ago. "I hope we didn't wake you." Lila was excited about trying the new pancake molds. "You didn't wake me," Sebastian replied, though in truth he'd been lying in bed since 4:30 a.m., staring at the ceiling and trying not to think about how Clara's laughter had echoed through the apartment the night before when she'd helped Lila with a puzzle. Clara studied his face for a moment, and Sebastian found himself wondering what she saw there. Did she notice the shadows under his eyes? The way his jaw tensed when he looked at her for too long? Or was he still successfully maintaining the facade of the composed businessman who had everything under control? "The butterfly pancakes are getting cold," she said finally, and there was something in her tone, a careful neutrality that hadn't been there a year ago. As they walked to the kitchen, Sebastian caught a whiff of Clara's perfume, something light and floral that reminded him of the jasmine that had grown outside his childhood home in Oregon. It was such a simple scent, yet it had the power to make him feel like he was drowning and being rescued at the same time. Lila climbed into her chair at the breakfast bar, chattering about her upcoming field trip to the Space Needle. Clara moved around the kitchen with the quiet efficiency of someone who knew exactly where everything belonged, which Sebastian realized with a start, she did. After 3 years, Clara knew his home better than most of his business associates knew their own offices. She knew that he preferred his coffee black and scalding hot. She knew that Lila needed exactly 7 minutes to eat her pancakes before getting distracted. She knew that Sebastian always left for work at precisely 7:52 a.m., and that he'd pause at the door, turn back as if he'd forgotten something, then leave without saying whatever was on his mind. What Clara didn't know, what Sebastian prayed she'd never discover, was that lately those pauses at the door weren't about forgotten business calls or misplaced documents. They were about her. As Sebastian watched Clara pour fresh orange juice into Lila's princess cup, he found himself noticing things he'd trained himself to ignore. The way she unconsciously tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when concentrating, the gentle patience in her voice when explaining why vegetables were important, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when Lila said something particularly amusing. "Mr. Langford?" Clara's voice cut through his observations. "You have the Hartwell presentation at 9:30 this morning. Would you like me to have your car brought around a few minutes early?" Sebastian blinked, realizing he'd been staring. "Yes," he managed, his voice rougher than he'd intended. "That would be efficient." Clara nodded and reached for her phone to text the garage, but not before Sebastian caught something flickering across her expression. Concern? Confusion? Or was it something else entirely? Something that made his pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine. "Daddy, you're not eating," Lila observed, pointing at Sebastian's untouched plate with her small fork. Sebastian looked down at the butterfly-shaped pancakes Clara had prepared for him. complete with fresh blueberries for the wings and a strawberry for the body. Such a simple gesture, yet it felt more intimate than any of the elaborate meals he'd shared with Seattle's social elite over the past months. "They're beautiful," he said quietly, and when he looked up, he found Clara watching him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. For a moment, the kitchen fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic from the street below. Sebastian found himself caught in Clara's gaze, and for the first time in 2 years, the carefully constructed walls around his heart felt dangerously thin. Then Lila dropped her fork, the metallic clatter breaking the spell, and Clara quickly busied herself cleaning up the mess. Sebastian finished his breakfast in silence, acutely aware of every sound Clara made, the soft whisper of her feet on the hardwood floor, the gentle clink of dishes being loaded into the dishwasher, the almost inaudible sigh she released when she thought no one was listening. At 7:51 a.m., Sebastian stood at the front door, his hand on the brushed steel handle. Behind him, he could hear Clara helping Lila gather her school supplies, their voices creating a warm soundtrack to his morning departure. He should leave. He had 17 phone calls to return, 2 contracts to review, and a merger that required his immediate attention. Instead, he found himself turning around, his eyes seeking Clara's across the apartment. She was kneeling beside Lila, adjusting the little girl's backpack straps, but she looked up as if she'd sensed his gaze. Their eyes met, and Sebastian felt something shift inside his chest, something dangerous and terrifying and utterly beyond his control. The afternoon rain drummed against the windows of the Langford penthouse as Clara folded Lila's tiny clothes in the laundry room, her movements automatic after 3 years of this routine, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying the moment from this morning when Sebastian had turned back at the door, his gray eyes holding something she'd never seen before, something that made her stomach flutter in ways that terrified her. "Miss Clara," Lila's voice echoed from the living room. "Can we make cookies? The ones with the chocolate chips that look like tiny smiles?" Clara smiled despite her churning thoughts. "Of course, sweetheart, let me just finish this load." She hung Lila's school dress on the small drying rack, her fingers lingering on the soft fabric. 3 years ago, when she'd first answered Sebastian's advertisement for a live-in nanny, she'd expected to care for a spoiled rich child. Instead, she'd found Lila, a quiet, sensitive little girl who still sometimes called for her mommy in the middle of the night. And she'd found Sebastian, a man so consumed by grief he'd forgotten how to live. Clara had told herself that her growing feelings for him were natural. After all, she lived in his home, shared his daily routines, watched him struggle to balance his demanding career with single parenthood. It would have been strange not to develop some sort of attachment. But lately, those feelings had evolved into something far more dangerous. The front door's electronic chime interrupted her thoughts, followed by the familiar sound of Sebastian's Italian leather shoes on the marble entryway. Clara glanced at her watch. 4:17 p.m. He was almost 3 hours early. "Daddy!" Lila shrieked with delight, her small feet thundering across the hardwood floor. Clara emerged from the laundry room to find Sebastian kneeling in the foyer, still in his charcoal suit, but with his tie loosened and his usually perfect hair slightly disheveled. Lila had thrown herself into his arms with the complete abandon that only children possess, and for a moment, Sebastian's carefully maintained composure cracked. He buried his face in his daughter's curls, and Clara caught the slight tremor in his shoulders. "I missed you, little butterfly," Sebastian murmured, his voice rough with an emotion Clara couldn't quite identify. "I missed you too, Daddy. Miss Clara and I were going to make smile cookies. Do you want to help?" Sebastian's eyes found Clara's over Lila's head, and something electric passed between them. Yes," he said, standing slowly. "I think I'd like that." Clara blinked in surprise. In 3 years, Sebastian had never joined them for afternoon activities. He was always working, conference calls with Tokyo, emergency meetings with investors, or locked away in his home office reviewing contracts. "Are you feeling all right, Mr. Langford?" Clara asked, studying his face for signs of illness. "I canceled my afternoon meetings," Sebastian said, as if this explained everything. He shrugged out of his suit jacket, revealing a crisp white shirt that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. I thought maybe I've been working too much." Lila clapped her hands together. "This is the best day ever." As they moved to the kitchen, Clara found herself hyper-aware of Sebastian's presence. When he rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong forearms dusted with dark hair, she had to look away. When he asked where they kept the mixing bowls, his hand accidentally brushed hers as she reached for the cabinet, and the simple contact sent electricity shooting up her arm. "So," Sebastian said, studying the recipe card Clara had written in her neat handwriting, "what exactly makes these cookies smile?" "The chocolate chips," Lila announced, bouncing on her toes. "Miss Clara puts them in special places so they look happy." Sebastian's mouth quirked into what might have been an actual smile, the first genuine one Clara had seen from him in months. "That sounds complicated." "Not complicated," Clara said softly. "Just intentional." Their eyes met again, and Clara felt her cheeks warm. There was something in the way Sebastian was looking at her, as if he was seeing her for the first time, really seeing her, not just as Lila's caregiver, but as a woman. As they worked together, measuring flour and sugar, Clara noticed how Sebastian's entire demeanor seemed to shift. His movements became less rigid, his voice softer. When Lila accidentally spilled vanilla extract on the counter, instead of his usual controlled reaction, he simply laughed, a rich, warm sound that Clara realized she'd never heard before. "You're different today," Clara said quietly while Lila was distracted with arranging chocolate chips on a test cookie. Sebastian paused, his hands stilling on the mixing bowl. "Different how?" "Lighter somehow. Like you're actually here instead of just present." He was quiet for a long moment, and Clara worried she'd overstepped a boundary. But then he said, "I had a meeting with the Hartwell Group this morning. Big merger. Lots of money involved. How did it go?" "I walked out." Clara nearly dropped the measuring cup she was holding. "You what?" "Halfway through their presentation, I realized I didn't care. About the merger, about the money, about any of it." Sebastian's voice was barely above a whisper. "All I could think about was getting home." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made Clara's heart race. She wanted to ask what had changed, what had made him choose home over the business that had consumed him for so long. But Lila chose that moment to declare the first batch of cookies ready for the oven, and the moment passed. As they slid the cookie sheet into the oven, Sebastian's phone buzzed on the counter. Clara could see multiple missed calls and dozens of unread text messages lighting up the screen. "Aren't you going to answer that?" Clara asked. Sebastian glanced at the phone, then deliberately turned it face down. Let them wait. The simple act felt revolutionary. Clara had watched Sebastian take emergency calls during Christmas dinner, answer emails during Lila's bedtime stories, and prioritize business over everything else in his life. But today, he was choosing to be present, choosing to be here, with them. As they waited for the cookies to bake, Lila curled up on the living room sofa with her tablet, leaving Clara and Sebastian alone in the kitchen. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows, creating an intimate cocoon around them. "Clara," Sebastian said, his voice careful, controlled, "can I ask you something?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Do you ever think about leaving?" The question hit Clara like a physical blow. Leaving. This job. This life. You're 30 years old, you're beautiful, intelligent. Don't you want your own family? Your own life? Clara's hands trembled as she wiped down the already clean counter. "This is my life, Mr. Langford. Lila is... she's everything to me. Just Lila." The question was so quiet Clara almost missed it. When she looked up, Sebastian was watching her with an intensity that made her feel exposed, vulnerable. "I don't know what you mean," she whispered. But she did know. And from the way Sebastian's jaw tightened, he knew she knew. The kitchen timer chose that moment to chime, breaking the tension like a snapped wire. Clara rushed to the oven, grateful for the distraction. But as she pulled out the tray of golden cookies, she could feel Sebastian's gaze burning into her back. "They're perfect," he said softly, and Clara wasn't entirely sure he was talking about the cookies. The Maple Valley Community Hospital's pediatric wing smelled like antiseptic and broken dreams. Sebastian sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, his expensive suit wrinkled from hours of anxious waiting, watching Clara pace the length of the small room like a caged lioness. Lila had woken up at 2 a.m. struggling to breathe. It had been Clara who'd heard the wheezing from down the hall, Clara who'd administered the emergency inhaler, Clara who'd made the split-second decision to call 911 when Lila's lips started turning blue. Sebastian had stumbled from his bedroom to find paramedics in his living room and his daughter's small hand gripping Clara's like a lifeline. Now, 4 hours later, Lila was stable and sleeping in the hospital bed, her auburn curls spread across the white pillow like spilled autumn leaves. The asthma attack had been severe but manageable, a combination of seasonal allergies and the stress of starting a new school semester. "She's going to be fine," Clara said for the 10th time, though Sebastian wasn't sure if she was trying to convince him or herself. "I know," Sebastian replied, but his voice came out rougher than he'd intended. The truth was, he'd felt helpless in a way that reminded him too much of the night Evangeline had died. The same crushing weight of potentially losing someone he couldn't bear to live without. Clara finally stopped pacing and sank into the chair beside him. She'd thrown on jeans and an oversized Stanford sweatshirt over her pajamas, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, and Sebastian thought she'd never looked more beautiful. "You saved her life," he said quietly. "I did my job," Clara replied, but her hands were shaking as she reached for the terrible hospital coffee they'd been nursing since dawn. "No." Sebastian turned to face her fully. "Clara, if you hadn't been there." He couldn't finish the sentence. The possibility was too terrifying to voice. Clara looked up at him, and Sebastian saw his own fear reflected in her brown eyes. "But I was there," she said softly. "I'll always be there." The simple statement hit Sebastian with unexpected force. In 3 years, Clara had never missed a day, never called in sick, never put her own needs before Lila's welfare. She'd been the constant in their fractured world, the steady presence that had allowed Sebastian to bury himself in work without worry. But somewhere along the way, Clara had stopped being just Lila's caregiver. She'd become home. "Mr. Langford?" Dr. Jennifer Holbrook appeared in the doorway, her scrubs rumpled from the long night shift. "Lila's doing wonderfully. We'll want to keep her for observation until this afternoon, but she should be able to go home around 4 o'clock. Sebastian stood, his legs stiff from sitting too long. "What can we do to prevent this from happening again?" "The usual precautions. Air purifiers, regular cleaning, monitoring her triggers. But honestly," Dr. Holbrook smiled at Clara, "having someone as prepared and quick-thinking as Clara around is the best medicine." She handled everything perfectly. After the doctor left, Sebastian found himself alone with Clara in the quiet corridor. Through the observation window, they could see Lila sleeping peacefully, her small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. "I've been thinking," Sebastian said, his voice barely above a whisper. "About what?" "About how you knew exactly what to do. The inhaler, the position to put her in, when to call for help. You knew better than I did how to save my own daughter." Clara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very young. Sebastian, the use of his first name stopped him cold. In 3 years, Clara had never called him anything but Mr. Langford. The intimacy of it, spoken in her soft voice in the hushed hospital corridor, felt like crossing a line neither of them could uncross. "I've been taking care of her since she was 3, Clara continued. "I know her breathing patterns, her sleep habits, what makes her laugh and what makes her cry. That's what happens when you love someone." "Is that what this is?" Sebastian asked, moving closer. "Love?" Clara's breath caught. "Sebastian, we can't what? Can't do this. Whatever this is." Clara's voice was strained. "You're my employer. Lila is my responsibility. And Evangeline is gone," Sebastian said, the words tearing from his throat like a confession. "She's been gone for 2 years, and I've been pretending that's enough. That work is enough. That just surviving is enough." "It has to be enough," Clara whispered, "because if it's not," Clara looked up at him, and Sebastian saw tears gathering in her eyes. "If it's not, then I've been lying to myself about why I stay." The admission hung between them like a live wire. Sebastian reached out, his fingers barely grazing Clara's cheek, and she closed her eyes at the contact. "Why do you stay?" he asked. "You know why. I need to hear you say it." Clara opened her eyes, and Sebastian saw everything he'd been hoping and dreading to find there. "Because somewhere along the way, taking care of Lila became taking care of you too, and I can't seem to stop." Sebastian's thumb traced the curve of Clara's cheekbone, wiping away a tear she didn't seem to realize had fallen. "Clara, this is crazy," she breathed, but she didn't step away from his touch. "Probably. It could ruin everything. I know. Lila needs stability. She needs normal." "What if this is normal?" Sebastian asked. "What if a family doesn't have to look the way everyone expects it to?" Before Clara could respond, a small voice called out from the hospital room. "Daddy? Miss Clara? I'm thirsty." They sprang apart like guilty teenagers, both reaching for the door handle at the same time. Their hands collided, and for a moment Sebastian didn't let go. "We'll figure this out," he said quietly. Clara looked at him with eyes full of longing and fear. "Will we?" As they entered Lila's room, Sebastian watched Clara immediately transform back into the perfect caregiver, adjusting pillows, fetching water, making gentle conversation about breakfast and going home plans. But every so often, her eyes would find his across the room, and Sebastian would see the truth neither of them was ready to voice. The crisis had changed everything, not just because Clara had saved Lila's life, but because it had forced Sebastian to confront what he'd been denying for months. He was falling in love with the woman who'd already become the heart of his home. 3 days had passed since the hospital, and Clara felt like she was walking through a minefield of stolen glances and unfinished conversations. Sebastian had returned to his normal schedule, early morning departures, late evening returns, but something fundamental had shifted in the space between them. Now, when he handed her his coffee cup in the morning, their fingers would linger for just a moment too long. When she updated him on Lila's day, his eyes would search her face as if memorizing every detail. And late at night, Clara would catch glimpses of him standing in his office doorway, watching her read bedtime stories to Lila with an expression that made her heart race. "Miss Clara, you're burning the grilled cheese," Lila observed from her perch at the kitchen counter, swinging her legs as she worked on her homework. Clara startled, quickly flipping the sandwich that had indeed turned golden brown on the verge of black. "Sorry, sweetheart. My mind was somewhere else." "Where was it?" The innocent question made Clara's cheeks warm. "Just thinking about grocery lists." Lila tilted her head with the skeptical expression she'd inherited from her father. "Grocery lists make you smile like that?" "Like what?" "Like when Daddy looks at you." Clara nearly dropped the spatula. "Lila, honey, what do you mean?" "He gets the same happy, sad face when he watches you," Lila said matter-of-factly, returning to her math worksheet. "Like when we watch the movies where the prince and princess want to be together but something scary is stopping them." From the mouths of babes, Clara turned back to the stove, her hands trembling slightly as she transferred the sandwich to a plate. Even a 6-year-old could see what they were both trying so hard to hide. The front door chimed and Clara's pulse immediately quickened. Sebastian's key in the lock had become the soundtrack to her anticipation, even though she knew it was dangerous to feel this way. "Daddy!" Lila scrambled down from her stool and raced to the foyer. Clara heard Sebastian's warm chuckle, followed by the sound of his briefcase hitting the marble floor, and Lila's delighted squeal as he presumably lifted her into his arms. The domestic symphony of their reunion made Clara's chest tight with longing. "How's my butterfly today?" Sebastian's voice carried into the kitchen. "Good. Miss Clara made grilled cheese, but she was thinking about grocery lists, so she almost burned it, but I saved it." "Grocery lists, Clara could hear the smile in Sebastian's voice, and when he appeared in the kitchen doorway with Lila still in his arms, his eyes found hers immediately. "Long day at the office?" Clara asked, noting the tension in his shoulders despite his relaxed demeanor with Lila. "The Yamamoto group is being difficult," Sebastian said, setting Lila back down. 3 conference calls, 2 revised proposals, and they're still not satisfied. "Maybe they need grilled cheese," Lila suggested seriously. "It always makes me feel better when I'm grumpy." Sebastian's laugh was genuine this time. "You know what? That's not the worst business strategy I've heard this week." As Clara prepared Sebastian's dinner, she found herself hyper-aware of his presence. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, and when he reached around her to grab a water glass from the cabinet, the brief contact of his arm against hers sent electricity shooting through her entire body. "Clara," he said quietly, his voice so close to her ear that she could feel his breath against her neck. "Yes? We need to talk." The words she'd been both dreading and hoping for. Clara's hands stilled on the plate she was holding. "When?" "After Lila goes to bed." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of normal routine, punctuated by loaded glances. Sebastian helped Lila with her homework while Clara cleaned the kitchen. During Lila's bath time, Clara could feel Sebastian watching from the hallway, his presence both comforting and unsettling. When it came time for bedtime stories, Sebastian surprised them both by joining them in Lila's room, something he hadn't done since the night of the hospital visit. "Read the one about the brave princess," Lila requested, snuggling between Clara and Sebastian on the small bed. As Clara read about Princess Cordelia's adventures, she was acutely aware of Sebastian's thigh pressed against hers, the warmth radiating through the cotton of her jeans. When she glanced at him during the dramatic parts of the story, she found him watching her instead of following along with the book. By the time Lila's breathing had deepened into sleep, Clara's nerves were stretched to the breaking point. "She's out," Sebastian whispered, carefully extracting himself from the bed. Clara followed him into the hallway, pulling Lila's door almost closed behind them. The apartment suddenly felt enormous and intimate at the same time. Living room, Sebastian suggested. They settled on opposite ends of the leather sofa, the space between them feeling like an ocean. Sebastian ran his hands through his dark hair, and Clara noticed the slight tremor in his fingers. "I've been thinking about what you said at the hospital," he began. Clara's stomach dropped. "Sebastian, let me finish." His voice was gentle but firm. "You said you stay because you can't seem to stop taking care of me. And you're right. You do take care of me. You make sure I eat. You leave notes about Lila's schedule. You somehow always know when I need coffee or silence or just presence." Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "That's my job." "No, it's not." Sebastian leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. "Your job is caring for Lila. Everything else, the way you make this place feel like home, the way you've helped me remember how to be human instead of just functional, that's something else entirely." "What are you saying?" Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, and Clara could see him choosing his words carefully. "I'm saying that somewhere along the way, you stopped being just Lila's nanny. You became essential." The word hung between them like a confession. "Sebastian, we can't—" "I know all the reasons why we can't," he interrupted. "I know about professional boundaries and social expectations and what people would think. I know that my wife died 2 years ago and I should probably still be grieving in some appropriate way. I know that you're 10 years younger than me and that this could complicate everything." Clara felt tears gathering in her eyes. "Then why are we having this conversation?" Sebastian stood up abruptly and began pacing, his movements sharp with contained energy. "Because 3 nights ago, when I thought I might lose Lila, the first person I needed was you. Not my assistant, not my brother, not any of the people who are supposed to matter in my life. You." He stopped pacing and turned to face her. "Because when you called me Sebastian instead of Mr. Langford, it felt like coming home. Because when I touch you, even accidentally, I feel alive for the first time in 2 years. Clara's breath caught. "Sebastian, because I'm falling in love with you, Clara. I think I have been for months, and I can't pretend anymore that it's going to go away." The confession shattered something inside Clara's chest. She stood up, her legs unsteady, and Sebastian immediately moved toward her. "Don't," she whispered, holding up a hand to stop him. "Please don't touch me right now, because if you do, I'll say something I can't take back." "What if I don't want you to take it back?" Clara looked up at him, and Sebastian saw everything in her eyes. The longing, the fear, the love she was fighting so hard to contain. The next morning arrived with the kind of Seattle drizzle that made the world feel muted and gray. Clara stood at the kitchen window, watching droplets race down the glass while her coffee grew cold in her hands. She'd barely slept after their conversation, Sebastian's words replaying in her mind like a song she couldn't stop humming. "I'm falling in love with you." The confession had left her raw and exposed, and now she had to face him across the breakfast table as if nothing had changed, as if her entire world hadn't shifted on its axis in the space between one heartbeat and the next. "Morning, Miss Clara." Lila bounced into the kitchen wearing her favorite purple dress and mismatched socks. "Is Daddy up yet? Today is show and tell, and I want to bring the picture of all of us at the zoo." Clara's stomach clenched. The picture in question had been taken 3 weeks ago during one of their rare family outings. Sebastian had surprised them both by suggesting they spend Saturday at the Woodland Park Zoo. In the photo, Lila sat on Sebastian's shoulders while Clara stood beside them, all 3 of them laughing at something Lila had said about the penguins. Looking at it now, Clara could see what others might see. A family. Complete. Natural. Right. "I'm sure your daddy would love that," Clara managed, pouring orange juice into Lila's cup with hands that trembled slightly. Sebastian appeared in the doorway as if summoned by their conversation. He wore his usual charcoal suit, but his tie hung unknotted around his neck, and his hair looked like he'd been running his fingers through it. When his eyes met Clara's, she saw the same restless energy that had kept her awake all night. "Good morning," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Morning, Daddy." Lila launched herself at him with her usual enthusiasm. "Can I take the zoo picture for show and tell? Mrs. Patterson says we should bring something that makes us happy." Sebastian's eyes found Clara's over Lila's head. "Something that makes you happy?" "Uh-huh, because you and Miss Clara make me the happiest," Lila declared with the devastating honesty of childhood. The silence that followed felt deafening. Clara busied herself with breakfast preparations while Sebastian helped Lila locate the photo, but she could feel the weight of unspoken words pressing down on all of them. "I have to leave early this morning. Sebastian said eventually. Emergency board meeting. The Yamamoto deal is falling apart. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. She'd learned to read Sebastian's business crises over the years. This one had the sharp edge of something that could genuinely threaten Langford Engineering's future. Will you be home for dinner? She asked, then immediately regretted the domestic intimacy of the question. I don't know. This could go late. As Sebastian gathered his things, Clara found herself memorizing the familiar routine, the way he checked his phone twice, adjusted his watch, patted his pocket to ensure he had his car keys. 3 years of mornings had made these small gestures as familiar as breathing. At the door, Sebastian paused. Clara? She looked up from where she was braiding Lila's hair. About last night. We don't have to talk about it now, Clara said quickly, acutely aware of Lila's curious gaze. No, we do. Just not here. Not yet. He left without another word, and Clara spent the rest of the morning moving through their routine in a haze of anxiety and anticipation. The call came at 2:47 p.m., while Clara was helping Lila with an art project at the kitchen table. Clara? Sebastian's voice sounded strained through the phone. I need you to pick up some documents from my office. Thompson will have them ready at the front desk. Of course. Is everything all right? A pause. The Yamamoto group walked away. 2 years of work, gone. Clara's heart clenched at the exhaustion in his voice. Sebastian, I'm sorry. I'll be in meetings until at least 10 tonight. There's leftover pasta in the fridge for dinner. Don't worry about us. Just take care of yourself. Another pause. Clara? Yes? Thank you. For everything. The line went dead, leaving Clara staring at her phone with a growing sense of unease. She'd heard Sebastian handle business crises before, but this felt different. More personal. More devastating. By 8 o'clock, Lila was tucked into bed with her favorite stuffed elephant, and Clara found herself pacing the apartment like a caged animal. She tried reading, tried watching television, tried organizing closets that were already perfectly organized. Nothing worked. Finally, she gave in to impulse and called Sebastian's office. Langford Engineering Night Service. Hi, this is Clara Dawson. Is Mr. Langford still in the building? Let me check. Yes, ma'am. He's still in his office. Would you like me to transfer you? No, thank you. I was just checking. Clara hung up and stared at the city lights twinkling beyond the penthouse windows. Sebastian was alone in his office, probably blaming himself for the failed deal, probably working himself into the ground trying to find a solution. Before she could talk herself out of it, Clara called Mrs. Henderson from the apartment across the hall, the elderly widow who occasionally watched Lila when emergencies arose. Of course, dear, Mrs. Henderson said when Clara explained the situation. That poor man works too hard. You go take care of him. 30 minutes later, Clara stood outside the imposing glass tower that housed Langford Engineering's headquarters. The building was mostly dark except for scattered lights on various floors, the dedicated few working late into the Seattle night. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor gave Clara too much time to question her decision. What was she doing? Sebastian was her employer, nothing more. Bringing him dinner and checking on his welfare was crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed. But when the elevator doors opened and Clara saw the light spilling from Sebastian's corner office, she knew she was exactly where she needed to be. Sebastian sat behind his massive desk, his suit jacket discarded, his sleeves rolled up, papers scattered around him like fallen leaves. His hair was disheveled, and when he looked up at the sound of her footsteps, Clara saw exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Clara? What are you doing here? Is Lila? Lila's fine. Mrs. Henderson is with her. Clara held up the bag she'd brought. I thought you might be hungry. Sebastian stared at her for a long moment, and Clara saw something vulnerable flicker across his features. You didn't have to come all the way down here. Yes, I did, Clara said simply, settling into the chair across from his desk. When was the last time you ate? Sebastian frowned as if trying to remember. Breakfast, I think. Clara pulled out the containers she'd packed. Leftover pasta, fresh bread, the chocolate chip cookies they'd made together. Simple comfort food that suddenly felt like the most important meal in the world. As Sebastian ate, Clara studied his face in the soft light of the desk lamp. He looked older than his 44 years tonight, worn down by responsibility and loss. The Yamamoto deal, she said finally. What does it mean for the company? Sebastian set down his fork and leaned back in his chair. It means we're in trouble. Real trouble. That contract would have secured our future for the next 5 years. Without it, I might have to lay people off. Good people who've been with the company for years. People with families. Clara's heart ached at the weight Sebastian carried on his shoulders. There has to be another way. I've been going through the numbers for hours. I can't see one. Clara stood up and moved around the desk, her hand settling gently on Sebastian's shoulder. The contact was electric, but more than that, it was necessary. Sebastian needed to know he wasn't alone. You'll figure it out, she said softly. You always do. Sebastian looked up at her, and in his eyes, Clara saw everything. The exhaustion, the fear, the love he'd confessed the night before. Without thinking, she reached out and smoothed the hair back from his forehead. Clara, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. I know, she breathed. I know we shouldn't. I know it's complicated and messy and could ruin everything. Then why are you here? Clara's hand stilled against his cheek. Because when you hurt, I hurt. Because when you're struggling, I can't just sit at home pretending I don't care. Because I love you too, she whispered, the words finally breaking free from the cage she'd built around her heart. And that terrifies me more than anything. Time seemed to suspend itself in the amber glow of the office lights. Sebastian's hands cradled her face with a tenderness that made Clara's knees weak. And when he finally closed the distance between them, the kiss was everything she'd imagined, and nothing she could have prepared for. It was soft and desperate, tentative and certain all at once. It tasted like coffee and unspoken confessions, like 3 years of careful boundaries finally crumbling into dust. When they broke apart, Clara found herself trembling against Sebastian's chest, her hands fisted in his shirt as if letting go might make her disappear entirely. Clara, Sebastian breathed against her forehead, his voice rough with emotion. God, Clara, I've wanted to do that for so long. We can't, she whispered, even as her body betrayed her by melting further into his embrace. Sebastian, we can't do this. Why? His thumb traced the curve of her cheek and Clara closed her eyes at the gentle contact. Give me one good reason that isn't about what other people think. Because... Clara struggled to form coherent thoughts with Sebastian's hands on her skin and his scent surrounding her like a warm blanket. Because Lila needs stability. Because you're grieving. Because I work for you. Lila adores you. She has for 3 years. Sebastian's voice was patient but insistent. And yes, I was grieving. But somewhere along the way, you helped me remember what it feels like to be alive. Clara opened her eyes and found Sebastian watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe it's time to stop running from this, from us. Before Clara could respond, the sound of the elevator chiming echoed through the empty office floor. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers, Clara smoothing her hair while Sebastian quickly straightened his tie. Mr. Langford? A voice called from the reception area. Sir, I have those revised contracts you requested. Thompson, Sebastian called back, his voice admirably steady despite the circumstances. I'll be right there. He turned back to Clara, his eyes searching her face. Don't run away from this, please. We need to talk, really talk, but not here. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Her lips still tingled from their kiss, and she could feel Sebastian's presence like electricity in her veins. The drive back to the penthouse passed in charged silence. Clara sat in the passenger seat of Sebastian's BMW, hyper-aware of every movement he made, the way his fingers gripped the steering wheel, the tension in his jaw, the occasional glances he stole in her direction when he thought she wasn't looking. By the time they reached home, it was nearly midnight. Mrs. Henderson met them at the door with a knowing smile and a gentle pat on Clara's arm. Little one never even stirred. She whispered, "Sweet dreams, you two." After Mrs. Henderson left, Clara found herself alone with Sebastian in the dimly lit living room, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them like a physical force. "Would you like some tea?" Clara asked, desperate for something to do with her hands. Clara. Sebastian's voice stopped her before she could escape to the kitchen. "We can't keep pretending this isn't happening." She turned to face him, and in the soft lamplight, Sebastian looked younger somehow, vulnerable. The powerful businessman who commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals was gone, replaced by a man who was simply achingly human. "I know," she said quietly, "but Sebastian, this is so complicated. Your reputation, the company, what people will think. I don't care what people think, but I do." Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "You have no idea what it's like to be the nanny who seduced her boss, the gold digger who took advantage of a grieving widower, the home wrecker who destroyed a family." Sebastian moved closer, his eyes flashing with something fierce. Is that really what you think? That you're taking advantage of me? Aren't I? Clara, look at me. Sebastian's voice was gentle but commanding. Really look at me. Do I seem like a man who's being manipulated? Clara met his gaze and saw the truth there. Sebastian was fully present, fully aware, fully committed to whatever was happening between them. You saved my life, he continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Not just the night at the hospital, but every day for 3 years. You brought light back into this house. You gave Lila stability and love when I was too broken to do it myself. You never asked for anything in return, never pushed for more than I was ready to give. Sebastian, if anyone's taking advantage, it's me. I'm the one who fell in love with someone who works for me. I'm the one who's been fighting these feelings for months. I'm the one who kissed you tonight. Clara felt tears gathering in her eyes. And I'm the one who kissed you back. Yes, Sebastian said, his lips quirking into the ghost of a smile. You did. They stood there in the charged silence, and Clara could feel the moment stretching between them like a bridge. She could walk across it, into Sebastian's arms, and whatever future they might build together. Or she could turn away, maintaining the safe distance that had protected them both for so long. What happens to us now? She asked. I don't know, Sebastian admitted. I've never been in this situation before. But Clara, I do know this. What I feel for you isn't going away. It's only getting stronger. And Lila? Lila loves you. She's loved you since the day you walked into our lives. In her mind, we're already a family. The words hit Clara like a physical blow. A family. It was everything she'd ever wanted and everything she'd convinced herself she could never have. What about Evangeline? Clara asked, the question barely audible. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, and Clara saw pain flicker across his features. Evangeline will always be part of me. She was my first love, the mother of my daughter. But she's gone, Clara. She's been gone for 2 years, and I can't live in the past forever. He reached out, his fingers barely grazing Clara's hand. Evangeline would want me to be happy. She'd want Lila to have a mother figure who loves her unconditionally. And I think she'd want me to love again. Clara felt a tear slip down her cheek. I'm scared. So am I, Sebastian admitted. Terrified, actually. But Clara, I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. The confession broke something open inside Clara's chest. She looked at Sebastian, really looked at him, and saw her future written in his eyes. Not perfect, not simple, but real and full of possibility. If we do this, she said slowly, we do it right. We tell Lila together. We're honest about what this means, and we take it slow. Sebastian's smile was like sunrise breaking over the horizon, as slow as you need. And if it doesn't work out, it will, Sebastian interrupted, his voice full of quiet conviction. Clara, what we have, it's not just attraction or convenience or loneliness. It's love, real love, the kind that builds families and weathers storms and grows stronger with time. Clara stepped closer, her hand finally finding his. Promise me something, anything. Promise me that no matter what happens, Lila comes first, always. Sebastian brought their joined hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. I promise. She's our priority. Both of us. Our. The word hung in the air between them like a benediction. 3 weeks had passed since that night in Sebastian's office. 3 weeks of carefully stolen moments and whispered conversations after Lila went to sleep. They'd kept their promise to take things slow, but every day brought small intimacies that made Clara's heart flutter like a teenager with her first crush. Sebastian's hand lingering on hers when he passed her his morning coffee. The way he'd started saying her name like a prayer. The goodnight kisses that began as gentle pecks and gradually deepened into something that left them both breathless and wanting more. But they hadn't told Lila yet. Clara stood at the kitchen window on a Saturday morning, watching Seattle's skyline emerge from the early mist, when small arms wrapped around her waist from behind. Morning, Miss Clara, Lila mumbled against her back, still warm from sleep and smelling like the lavender detergent Clara used on her pajamas. Good morning, sweetheart. Clara turned in Lila's embrace, smoothing down the little girl's sleep-mussed curls. You're up early for a Saturday. I heard Daddy singing in the shower, Lila said, tilting her head with curious 6-year-old logic. He never sings. Is he happy about something? Clara's cheeks warmed. Sebastian had been singing, humming, really, some jazz standard she didn't recognize while making his coffee 20 minutes earlier. The sound had made something flutter in her chest, the simple joy of a man who'd rediscovered contentment. Maybe he's just having a good morning. Clara said carefully. Or, maybe, Lila said with the devastating perceptiveness that children possessed, he's happy because you make him smile now. Before Clara could formulate a response, Sebastian appeared in the kitchen doorway, his dark hair still damp from the shower and wearing jeans and a navy sweater that made his gray eyes look almost silver. The casual clothes were a departure from his usual Saturday routine of catching up on work emails, and Clara felt her pulse quicken at the sight of him. Well, if it isn't my two favorite ladies, Sebastian said, his voice carrying a warmth that made Clara's stomach do small flips. Lila launched herself at her father with typical enthusiasm. Daddy, Miss Clara says you're having a good morning. Can we make pancakes? The special ones with the blueberry faces? Sebastian's eyes found Clara's over Lila's head, and the look that passed between them was full of affection and barely restrained heat. I think that sounds perfect, but only if Miss Clara helps. Of course she'll help, Lila said, as if the idea of Clara not being involved was absurd. We're a team. We're a team. The words hit Clara with unexpected force. In Lila's innocent worldview, the three of them were already a unit, a family in everything but name. As they moved around the kitchen together, Clara marveled at how natural it felt. Sebastian measured flour while Clara mixed eggs, and Lila arranged blueberries with the serious concentration of a master artist. When Sebastian's hand brushed against Clara's as they reached for the same utensil, the contact sent sparks up her arm, but it felt right, like coming home. Miss Clara, Lila said suddenly, looking up from her blueberry arrangement with wide, serious eyes. Can I ask you something? Of course, honey. Do you love my daddy? The question hit the kitchen like a bomb. Clara's hand stilled on the mixing bowl, and she felt Sebastian go rigid beside her. They'd discussed how to approach this conversation with Lila, but Clara had imagined it happening on their terms when they were ready. Children, apparently, had their own timeline. Lila, Clara began, her voice carefully neutral. Because I think you do, Lila continued with the relentless honesty of childhood. And I think he loves you too. You get the same look in your eyes that people in movies get when they're about to kiss. Clara felt heat flood her cheeks. She glanced at Sebastian, who looked equally stunned by his daughter's directness. Butterfly, Sebastian said gently, settling onto the stool beside Lila. That's a very grown-up question. I'm 6, Lila said, as if this made her practically ancient. And I'm not stupid. You've been different for weeks. Happy different. And Miss Clara blushes every time you look at her. Clara pressed her hands to her burning cheeks, confirming Lila's observation. I do not. You're doing it right now, Lila pointed out with a giggle. Sebastian reached out and took Clara's hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. The gesture was tender and public, and Clara realized that their careful secret was already blown. Lila, Sebastian said, his voice serious but gentle, how would you feel if Miss Clara and I cared about each other in the way that grown-ups sometimes do? Lila tilted her head, considering this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. You mean like how Prince Eric loved Ariel? Or how Mama loved you before she went to heaven? The mention of Evangeline made Sebastian's jaw tighten slightly, but he nodded. Something like that. Yes. Lila was quiet for a long moment, her small fingers absently rearranging blueberries while she thought. Clara held her breath, suddenly terrified of what this precious little girl might say. Would Miss Clara still be my nanny? Lila asked finally. Miss Clara would still take care of you, Sebastian said carefully, but she might be more than your nanny. Like a mom? The word hung in the air like a question mark. Clara felt tears prick her eyes at the hope in Lila's voice, the longing for something she'd been missing for 2 years. Maybe, Sebastian said softly. If that's something you'd want. Lila looked at Clara with eyes that were suddenly much older than 6. Miss Clara, would you want to be my mom? Not instead of my real mom, because she's in heaven and that's different, but like my now mom. Clara's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the span of a single heartbeat. She knelt down so she was eye level with Lila, her hands gently cupping the little girl's face. Lila, she said, her voice thick with emotion, there is nothing in this world I would want more than to be your now mom. You are the most amazing, smart, funny, beautiful little girl, and I have loved you since the day I met you. Really? Really. But honey, that would mean some things would change. Miss Clara wouldn't live in the guest room anymore. She'd be part of our family in a different way. Lila considered this for exactly 3 seconds before flinging her arms around Clara's neck. Good. Because I already pretend you're my mom when kids at school talk about their moms. And Mrs. Patterson always asks about my family for projects. And I always draw you in the pictures anyway. Clara felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she held Lila tight. Over the little girl's shoulder, she saw Sebastian watching them with an expression of such love and wonder that it took her breath away. So, Lila said, pulling back to look at both of them, does this mean you're going to get married and kiss and stuff? Sebastian laughed, the sound rich and full of joy. Well, we haven't quite figured all that out yet, Butterfly. But yes, there might be some kissing involved. Gross, Lila said, but she was grinning. But also good gross. Like medicine that tastes yucky but makes you feel better. That's actually a pretty good analogy, Clara said, wiping her eyes. Can I tell Mrs. Patterson that I have a real family now for the Mother's Day project? Clara looked at Sebastian, who nodded with tears in his own eyes. Yes, Clara whispered. You can tell her you have a real family. As they finished making breakfast together, Clara marveled at how simple it had been. All their worry, all their careful planning, and in the end, Lila had seen what they'd been too scared to admit. They were already a family. They had been for months. The only thing that had changed was that now they could stop pretending otherwise. 2 months had passed since Lila's enthusiastic blessing of their relationship. 2 months of quiet domestic bliss that felt almost too good to be true. Clara had moved into Sebastian's room gradually, one drawer at a time, until her presence there felt as natural as breathing. They'd fallen into new routines seamlessly. Sebastian would wake Clara with gentle kisses before his early morning runs. Clara would prepare breakfast while he showered, and they'd share coffee and quiet conversation before Lila bounded downstairs full of 6-year-old energy. Evenings were spent as a family. Homework at the kitchen table, movie nights on the living room sofa, bedtime stories read in 3-part harmony. Clara had never known she could be this happy, which was why the knock on the door at 3:17 on a Tuesday afternoon felt like a crack in their perfect world. I'll get it, Clara called to Lila, who was sprawled on the living room floor working on an elaborate Lego castle. Through the security monitor, Clara saw a woman she didn't recognize. Tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in the kind of designer suit that screamed old money and social status. Clara opened the door with the polite smile she'd perfected during her years as a nanny. Can I help you? The woman's blue eyes raked over Clara with calculating precision, taking in her simple jeans and sweater, her ponytail, her bare feet. I'm looking for Sebastian Langford. I'm Vivian Ashworth. The name hit Clara like a physical blow. Vivian Ashworth, Sebastian's former sister-in-law, Evangeline's older sister, and one of Seattle's most prominent socialites. Clara had never met her, but she'd heard enough stories to know that Vivian was formidable, influential, and fiercely protective of the Ashworth family legacy. Mr. Langford is at the office, Clara said carefully. I'm Clara Dawson, Lila's nanny. Would you like me to call him? Vivian's smile was sharp as a blade. Oh, I know exactly who you are, Miss Dawson. And no, I think you and I should chat first. Clara's stomach clenched with dread, but she stepped aside to let Vivian enter. In the living room, Lila looked up from her Legos with curious eyes. Aunt Vivian. Lila scrambled to her feet, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure. I didn't know you were coming to visit. Vivian's entire demeanor softened as she knelt to embrace Lila. Hello, darling girl. My goodness, you've grown so much since Christmas. Clara watched the interaction with growing unease. She'd forgotten that Vivian was family, Lila's aunt, one of the few connections the little girl had to her deceased mother. Lila, sweetheart, Clara said gently, why don't you take your Legos up to your room? I'll bring you a snack in a few minutes. But I want to show Aunt Vivian my castle. Later, darling, Vivian said, her voice kind but firm. I need to have a grown-up conversation with Miss Dawson first. After Lila reluctantly gathered her toys and headed upstairs, Clara found herself alone with a woman who looked like she could cut glass with her stare. Please sit, Clara said, gesturing to the living room sofa. Thank you. Vivian settled herself with the grace of someone accustomed to command. You have a lovely home here. It's not my home, Clara replied carefully. I work here. Do you? Vivian's eyebrow arched elegantly. Because from what I understand, your employment situation has become rather complicated. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. I'm not sure what you mean. Please, Miss Dawson, let's not insult each other's intelligence. Vivian crossed her legs and leaned back, every inch the queen holding court. I have friends throughout Seattle society. Word travels quickly when a prominent widower like Sebastian begins. entertaining his domestic help. The phrase domestic help landed like a slap. Clara straightened her spine, drawing on every ounce of dignity she possessed. My relationship with Mr. Langford is personal. Your relationship, Vivian repeated, as if the words tasted bitter. How interesting that you call it that. What would you call it? A mistake. Vivian's voice was crisp, matter-of-fact. A rather predictable one, actually. Grieving widower, attractive young employee, proximity and vulnerability. It's practically a cliché. Clara felt anger flare in her chest. You don't know anything about Sebastian and me. I know that Sebastian is a good man who's been through tremendous trauma, Vivian replied evenly. I know that he's vulnerable, lonely and prone to making decisions based on convenience rather than what's truly best for his daughter. And you think I'm not what's best for Lila? I think you're a nanny who's overstepped her boundaries. Vivian's voice remained calm, but her eyes were ice cold. Tell me, Miss Dawson, what happens when Sebastian's grief fully lifts and he realizes he's settled for the hired help instead of finding someone appropriate, someone from his own world, with his own background, who can give Lila the social connections and cultural advantages she deserves? Each word was chosen with surgical precision, designed to cut deep. Clara felt her confidence wavering under the assault of Vivian's perfectly articulated fears that echoed her own midnight doubts. Sebastian loves me, Clara said, but even to her own ears, the words sounded uncertain. Does he? Or does he love the idea of you? Vivian leaned forward slightly. You've been taking care of his daughter, managing his household, making his life easier for 3 years. You're safe, familiar, convenient. But love? Real love? The kind that builds lasting marriages and provides proper foundations for children? What do you want? Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I want what's best for my niece, what's best for my late sister's daughter. Vivian's voice softened slightly, revealing genuine emotion beneath the polished exterior. Evangeline was exceptional, brilliant, accomplished, from one of Seattle's finest families. She gave Lila a legacy, a place in society, opportunities that money can't buy. Vivian reached into her purse and withdrew a thick envelope. This is a cashier's check for $200,000. Take it, leave quietly, and let Sebastian find someone appropriate to help him raise Lila. Clara stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. You're trying to buy me off. I'm trying to give you a future, Vivian replied. $200,000 is more than you'd make in 5 years as a nanny. You could go back to school, start your own business, find a man from your own background who can give you the life you actually deserve. You think Sebastian is too good for me. I think you're not good enough for Lila. Vivian's words were gentle but devastating. She deserves a mother who can open doors for her, who understands her heritage, who can guide her through the complexities of the world she was born into. You're a lovely girl, Clara, but you're a nanny from a middle-class background. You don't understand what it means to be an Ashworth. Clara felt tears threatening, but she refused to let them fall in front of this woman. Lila doesn't care about any of that. Children rarely know what's best for them. That's why they need adults to make the hard choices. Vivian set the envelope on the coffee table between them. Sebastian is a wonderful father, but he's a man. He doesn't understand the social nuances that will shape Lila's future. The right schools, the right connections, the right kind of mother. These things matter. And you think I can't provide any of that. I think you love that little girl enough to want what's truly best for her, even if it breaks your heart. Vivian stood gracefully. Think about it, Clara. Really think about it. Is your happiness worth limiting Lila's entire future? After Vivian left, Clara sat alone in the living room, staring at the envelope that represented everything she'd never had and everything she was apparently not good enough to keep. When Sebastian came home that evening, full of smiles and stories about his day, Clara felt like she was watching him through glass, close enough to touch, but suddenly impossibly far away. The letter sat on Sebastian's desk like a loaded weapon, 3 paragraphs that would detonate their carefully constructed world. Clara had written and rewritten it 17 times over the past week, each version a little more clinical, a little less likely to reveal the way her heart was shattering with every word. Dear Mr. Langford, please accept this letter as my formal resignation from my position as Lila's caregiver, effective 2 weeks from today's date. I have accepted another opportunity that will allow me to advance my career and personal goals. I will ensure a smooth transition and am happy to help interview and train my replacement. Lila is an extraordinary child, and I have no doubt she will continue to thrive under new care. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of your family's life. Sincerely, Clara Dawson. The lies burned her throat like acid. There was no other opportunity, no career advancement, no future beyond the $200,000 sitting in her bank account, money that felt like 30 pieces of silver every time she thought about it. But Vivian's words had taken root in the dark corners of Clara's mind, growing like poisonous weeds. You're not good enough for Lila. You don't understand what it means to be an Ashworth. Is your happiness worth limiting her entire future? For 7 sleepless nights, Clara had watched Sebastian and Lila together. Really watched them. She saw the way Lila's eyes lit up when Sebastian told stories about her mother, how she treasured the few pieces of Evangeline's jewelry Sebastian had saved for her. She noticed how naturally Lila gravitated toward the finer things in their world. The charity galas Sebastian occasionally attended, the ballet performances, the museum exhibitions. Clara was a small-town girl from Oregon who'd worked her way through community college. She knew how to change diapers and make mac and cheese and sing lullabies, but she didn't know how to navigate Seattle society or understand the subtle codes of old money families. What if Vivian was right? What if loving Lila meant letting her go? The sound of Sebastian's key in the front door made Clara's stomach clench. She'd timed this perfectly. Lila was at a sleepover with her friend Zara, and Sebastian had just returned from his evening run. They'd have privacy for the conversation that would end everything. "Clara?" Sebastian's voice echoed through the apartment, warm with the anticipation of seeing her that had become his evening ritual. "In your office," Clara called back, her voice steadier than she'd expected. Sebastian appeared in the doorway moments later, his hair damp with sweat, his running clothes clinging to his body in ways that still made Clara's pulse quicken despite everything. When he saw the letter on his desk, his expression shifted from joy to confusion to something that looked like dread. "What's this?" he asked, but Clara could tell he already knew. "My resignation," Clara said simply. Sebastian picked up the letter with hands that seemed suddenly unsteady. Clara watched his face as he read, saw the exact moment when confusion transformed into something much more devastating. "I don't understand," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Clara, what's going on? Is this about us? About our relationship? This is about what's best for Lila. What's best for Lila?" Sebastian's voice rose slightly. "Clara, Lila adores you. You're the only mother she's known for the past 3 years. How is abandoning her what's best for her?" The word abandoning hit Clara like a physical blow, but she forced herself to remain steady. "She'll adapt. Children are resilient. Don't." Sebastian's voice was sharp now, edged with an anger Clara had never heard before. "Don't you dare stand there and talk about my daughter like she's some abstract concept. This isn't about Lila at all, is it? This is about you running away." "I'm not running away. I'm making a responsible decision." "Bullshit." Sebastian threw the letter down on his desk. "A week ago you were talking about enrolling Lila in violin lessons. 3 days ago you were planning her birthday party. Last night you fell asleep in my arms talking about how happy you were. What changed, Clara? What happened?" Clara felt her carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. "Nothing happened. I realized that this situation isn't sustainable." "What situation? You mean us? Our family?" "We're not a family," Clara said, the words tearing from her throat like shards of glass. "I'm your employee who you're sleeping with. There's a difference." Sebastian stepped back as if she'd slapped him. "Is that really what you think? After everything we've shared, everything we've built together? What we've built is a fantasy," Clara continued, hating herself with every word but unable to stop. "You're Sebastian Langford, heir to a multi-million-dollar company, member of Seattle's social elite. I'm Clara Dawson, a nanny from Bend, Oregon, whose biggest accomplishment before this job was graduating from community college. I don't give a damn about any of that, but other people do, and eventually you will too." Sebastian moved closer, his eyes searching her face with desperate intensity. "Clara, where is this coming from? A week ago you told me you loved me. You told Lila you wanted to be her mom. Was all of that a lie?" "No," Clara whispered, tears finally spilling over despite her efforts to contain them. "None of it was a lie. But love isn't always enough. Like hell it isn't." Sebastian reached for her, but Clara stepped away, putting the desk between them like a barrier. "Sebastian, please, don't make this harder than it already is." "Harder?" Sebastian's laugh was bitter. "Clara, you're destroying everything we've built. You're breaking Lila's heart. You're breaking my heart. And you want me to make it easier for you? I want you to understand that I'm doing this because I love you both too much to hold you back. Hold us back from what? Clara took a shaky breath. From the life Lila deserves. From the kind of woman who can give her everything. The right connections. The right opportunities. The right kind of mother. Sebastian stared at her for a long moment, and Clara saw understanding dawn in his eyes. Someone talked to you. Someone got in your head and convinced you that you're not good enough. Clara's silence was answer enough. Who was it? Sebastian's voice was dangerously quiet. Who made you believe this garbage? It doesn't matter. Like hell it doesn't matter. Was it someone from the company? Someone from Lila's school? Sebastian's eyes narrowed. Or was it someone from Evangeline's family? Clara's sharp intake of breath gave her away. Vivian, Sebastian said, the name falling from his lips like a curse. Vivian came here, didn't she? What did she say to you, Clara? What did she threaten you with? She didn't threaten me. She offered me money to leave quietly. The admission hung between them like a live grenade. Sebastian's face went through a series of emotions. Shock, rage, and finally, devastation. And you took it, he said quietly. I took it because she was right, Clara said, her voice breaking completely now. Because Lila deserves better than a nanny who doesn't know how to be anything else. Because you deserve someone who can stand beside you as an equal, not someone you have to elevate. Clara, listen to me. Sebastian's voice was gentle but urgent. Vivian Ashworth is a bitter, lonely woman who's never gotten over the fact that her sister chose love over social expectations. Evangeline married me despite her family's objections because she believed that love was more important than pedigree. But you're both from the same world. No, we weren't. My father built Langford Engineering from nothing. He was a construction worker who happened to be brilliant with structural design. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood just like you did. The only difference is that my father's company succeeded. Clara stared at him, feeling the foundation of her decision beginning to crack. Evangeline's family never approved of me either. Sebastian continued. They thought she was marrying beneath her station, but she didn't care, because she knew that love, real love, doesn't care about social status or family connections or any of the garbage that people like Vivienne think matters. But Lila needs a mother who loves her unconditionally. Someone who will read her bedtime stories and help with homework and be there when she's scared or sad or happy. She doesn't need someone with the right last name or the right connections. She needs you, Clara. She's needed you since the day you walked into our lives. Clara felt her resolve crumbling, but Vivian's words still echoed in her mind. What if you're wrong? What if I'm holding her back? Sebastian moved around the desk, closing the distance between them despite Clara's attempts to maintain space. Then we'll figure it out together. We'll make sure Lila has every opportunity she deserves. But Clara, those opportunities mean nothing without love, without family, without you. He reached out and gently cupped her face, his thumbs wiping away the tears that wouldn't stop falling. Don't let someone else's poison destroy what we have. Don't let them win. I can't, Clara whispered, but even as the words left her lips, her hands were reaching for Sebastian's face, memorizing the feel of his skin under her fingertips. Sebastian, I can't do this to Lila. What if Vivienne is right? What if I'm not enough? Clara. Sebastian's voice was rough with emotion as he pulled her closer, eliminating the last inches of space between them. Look at me. Really look at me. Clara raised her eyes to meet his, and what she saw there made her breath catch. Not pity, not desperation, but absolute certainty. Do you remember the night Lila had her asthma attack? Sebastian asked softly. Clara nodded, her throat too tight to speak. I was useless that night, completely paralyzed by fear. But you knew exactly what to do. You saved her life, Clara. Not because you have the right degree or the right social connections, but because you love her. Because you've spent 3 years learning every detail about that little girl, every fear, every joy, every need. But that's just what a mother does. Sebastian interrupted gently. That's what love looks like, Clara. Not charity galas or private schools or knowing which fork to use at dinner. Love is knowing that Lila needs exactly 7 minutes to eat her breakfast before getting distracted. Love is sitting up all night when she has a fever. Love is the way her whole face lights up when you walk into a room. Clara felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. She's going to face challenges I don't know how to help her with. Then we'll learn together. Clara, do you think I knew how to braid hair when Evangeline died? Do you think I had any idea how to handle tea parties or explain why some kids don't have mommies? Sebastian's thumb traced her cheekbone. I figured it out because I had to. Because I love her. The same way you'll figure out whatever challenges come our way. But Vivian is Lila's aunt, and she'll always be part of our lives. But she doesn't get to decide what's best for my daughter. I do, and Lila does. And Clara, I need you to understand something. If you walk away now, you won't just be breaking my heart. You'll be abandoning a little girl who's already lost one mother. The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She thought about Lila's excited chatter about the Mother's Day project, about the way she'd started calling Clara Mom with such natural ease, about the trust in those wide green eyes. I'm scared, Clara admitted, the words barely audible. Good, Sebastian said, surprising her. Being scared means you understand how much this matters. Clara, I've been terrified every day since I realized I was falling in love with you. Terrified of messing it up, of not being enough, of somehow dishonoring Evangeline's memory. And I realized that being afraid isn't a reason to run away from love. It's a reason to fight for it. Sebastian's hands moved to frame her face completely. Clara, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm not asking you to become someone you're not. I'm asking you to be exactly who you are. The woman who makes terrible jokes while folding laundry, who knows every word to every Disney song, who cries at commercials about dogs. Despite everything, Clara felt a smile tugging at her lips. I don't cry at commercials about dogs. You absolutely do. And Lila and I love you for it. Sebastian's own smile was soft, hopeful. Clara, you are enough. You've always been enough. The only person who doesn't see that is you. Clara closed her eyes, feeling the last of her resistance melting away. When she opened them again, Sebastian was still there, still looking at her like she hung the moon. The money, she said suddenly. I have to give Vivian back the money. We'll write her a check tomorrow, Sebastian said immediately, with interest. And a letter. I need to write her a letter explaining why I'm staying. Whatever you need. Clara took a shaky breath. And I want to meet Evangeline's parents. If they're going to be part of Lila's life, I want to understand that part of her heritage. I want to honor it. Sebastian's eyes filled with tears. Clara, I'm not trying to replace Evangeline, Clara continued, the words coming faster now as clarity replaced confusion. I can't replace her, and I wouldn't want to, but I can love Lila and you, and try to be worthy of the family we're building together. You are worthy, Sebastian said fiercely. Clara, you are so much more than worthy. Before Clara could respond, they heard the sound of the front door opening, followed by Lila's voice calling out in confusion. Mom? Dad? Why are you both crying? Clara's heart skipped at the casual way Lila had called her mom, and she saw Sebastian's face light up with the same wonder. We're in Dad's office, sweetheart, Clara called back, quickly wiping her eyes. Lila appeared in the doorway moments later, still in her pajamas from the sleepover, her hair in a messy braid and her arms full of drawings she'd made at her friend's house. Zara's mom had to bring me home early because she got sick, Lila announced, then stopped short when she saw the resignation letter on Sebastian's desk. Despite being only 6, Lila had learned to read remarkably well, and Clara watched in horror as the little girl's face crumpled. You're leaving? Lila's voice was small and broken. Mom, you're leaving us? Clara dropped to her knees immediately, gathering Lila into her arms. No, baby. No, I'm not leaving. I'm never leaving. But the letter says... The letter was a mistake, Clara said firmly, looking up at Sebastian, who nodded and immediately crumpled the resignation letter into a ball. I was scared and confused, but I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. You are my family. Lila pulled back to look at Clara with serious eyes. Promise? I promise, Clara said, then looked at Sebastian. We all promise. Sebastian knelt down beside them, wrapping both Clara and Lila in his arms. We're a team, remember? Teams stick together. Even when things get scary? Lila asked. Especially when things get scary, Clara confirmed. Later that evening, after Lila had shown them every drawing from her sleepover and had been tucked into bed with extra hugs and reassurances, Clara and Sebastian sat on their bedroom balcony, watching the Seattle skyline twinkle in the distance. I need to ask you something, Clara said, curled against Sebastian's side. Anything. When you said you wanted to marry me someday, did you mean it? Or was that just something you said in the heat of the moment? Sebastian was quiet for so long that Clara began to worry she'd misunderstood. Then he shifted, reaching into his nightstand drawer, and Clara's heart stopped. The ring box was small, black velvet, and obviously expensive. When Sebastian opened it, Clara saw a stunning but simple solitaire diamond set in platinum. Elegant, timeless, perfect. "I bought this 3 weeks ago," Sebastian said quietly. "I've been carrying it around like a talisman, waiting for the right moment. I was going to propose on Lila's birthday, with her help, because I knew she'd want to be part of it." Clara stared at the ring, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Sebastian, I know this isn't the most romantic proposal," Sebastian continued, his voice rough with nerves. "You're wearing my old college sweatshirt, I'm in pajama pants, and we just spent the evening crying over resignation letters. But Clara, I can't wait anymore. I can't risk losing you again." He slipped off the couch onto one knee, taking Clara's left hand in his. "Clara Dawson, you are the love of my life, the mother of my heart's daughter, and the reason I remember how to be happy. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and Lila's mom, and the center of our chaotic, beautiful, perfectly imperfect family?" Clara looked down at this man who'd given her everything she'd never dared to dream of. Love, family, home, belonging. Through the sliding glass door she could see into Lila's room, where the little girl slept peacefully, surrounded by the drawings she'd made of their family. Their family. "Yes," Clara whispered, then louder. "Yes, Sebastian. Yes to all of it." As Sebastian slipped the ring onto her finger, Clara realized that Vivian had been wrong about one thing. Love wasn't about being good enough or worthy enough or having the right credentials. 2 years later, Clara stood in the same kitchen where their love story had quietly unfolded, but everything had changed, and somehow, everything was exactly as it should be. The morning sun streamed through the windows of their new home in Queen Anne, a charming Victorian that Sebastian had surprised her with 6 months after their wedding. It was smaller than the penthouse, more intimate, with a garden where Lila could play and a reading nook where Clara curled up with her evening tea. "Mom, do you think baby brother will like pancakes?" 8-year-old Lila asked from her perch at the kitchen island, one hand resting protectively on Clara's rounded belly. Clara smiled, her free hand covering Lila's smaller one as she felt their son kick against her ribs. "I think he's going to love everything his big sister makes for him." At 7 months pregnant, Clara moved with the careful grace of a woman who'd learned to balance love and life in ways she'd never imagined possible. The wedding ring on her finger caught the morning light, the same elegant solitaire Sebastian had proposed with, now accompanied by a simple platinum band that matched his own. "Sebastian Langford Dawson," Clara murmured, testing their son's name on her tongue. They'd decided to hyphenate, honoring both their histories while creating something new together. "What about just Sebastian?" Sebastian's voice came from the doorway, warm with the humor that had become his default mode over the past 2 years. "I promise I'll try not to be offended by the lack of creativity." Clara turned to find her husband leaning against the doorframe, his hair still damp from his morning run, wearing the navy blue sweater that made his eyes look like storm clouds. Even after 2 years of marriage, the sight of him still made her pulse quicken. "Daddy!" Lila launched herself from her stool into Sebastian's arms. "Mom's making celebration pancakes because it's adoption day." "Adoption day," Sebastian repeated, spinning Lila around before setting her down gently. His eyes found Clara's across the kitchen, and the look that passed between them was full of quiet wonder. Today, the legal formalities would finally be complete. Today, Clara would officially become Lila's mother in the eyes of the law, though in every way that mattered, she'd held that title for years. "Are you nervous?" Sebastian asked, moving to stand behind Clara, his hands settling on her shoulders with the casual intimacy of long practice. "Terrified," Clara admitted, leaning back against his chest. "What if I mess up the paperwork? What if the judge asks me something I don't know how to answer?" "Then you'll figure it out," Lila said matter-of-factly, echoing the phrase that had become their family motto. "That's what families do." Clara laughed, her anxiety melting under the combined warmth of her husband's touch and her daughter's certainty. Their daughter. After today, it would be official. The doorbell rang, and Lila raced to answer it, returning moments later with Sebastian's parents, George and Martha Langford, who'd embraced Clara from their first meeting with the kind of unconditional acceptance she'd never expected to find. "How's our girl doing?" Martha asked, immediately bustling toward Clara with the efficiency of a woman who'd raised 3 sons and understood the particular needs of pregnant women. "Hungry, tired, and terrified," Clara said honestly. "Perfect," George declared, settling onto one of the kitchen stools with the easy comfort of a man who considered this house his second home. That means you're taking it seriously." As the family gathered around the breakfast table, Clara marveled at how naturally they'd all fit together. Sebastian's parents adored Lila and had accepted Clara not as an interloper, but as the woman who'd brought their son back to life. Even Sebastian's brother David, initially skeptical of the nanny situation, had become one of Clara's fiercest defenders. The only family member notably absent was Vivian Ashworth. After Clara had returned her money with a politely firm letter explaining her decision to stay, Vivian had made her disapproval known through a series of pointed social snubs and conspicuous absences from family gatherings. But gradually, as it became clear that Clara wasn't going anywhere, Vivian had begun to thaw. The breakthrough had come 6 months ago, when Lila had been hospitalized with pneumonia. Vivian had arrived at the hospital expecting to find Clara absent, ready to swoop in as the responsible family member. Instead, she'd found Clara maintaining a vigil beside Lila's bed, 3 days into her stay, reading Charlotte's Web for the 10th time, because it was Lila's favorite. "You look terrible," Vivian had observed. "Thanks," Clara had replied dryly, not looking up from the book. "You look like $1 million, as always." Vivian had studied Clara for a long moment. The rumpled clothes, the exhausted eyes, the fierce protectiveness that radiated from every line of her body. "She's lucky to have you," Vivian had said finally, the words clearly costing her something. "I'm the lucky one," Clara had replied, and meant it. They weren't friends, probably never would be, but they'd reached an understanding. Vivian sent birthday gifts and attended school plays, maintaining her role as Lila's connection to the Ashworth legacy. Clara reciprocated by ensuring Lila understood and honored that heritage, even as she helped the little girl build something entirely new. "Ready?" Sebastian asked, breaking Clara out of her reverie. She looked around the table at their gathered family. Sebastian's parents discussing baseball scores with Lila, Sebastian himself watching Clara with eyes full of love and pride, their unborn son moving restlessly under her heart. "Ready," Clara said, and meant it. The courthouse ceremony was simple, dignified, and exactly perfect. Judge Patricia Reynolds, a family court veteran with kind eyes and a gentle manner, made the formal proceedings feel more like a celebration than a legal obligation. "Clara Langford," the judge said, smiling as she signed the final documents. "Congratulations, you are now officially Lila's mother." Lila, dressed in her favorite purple dress and clutching a bouquet of daisies, beamed as if she'd just won the lottery. "Can I call you Mom in front of everyone now? Like, officially?" "You've been calling me Mom for 2 years, sweetheart," Clara laughed, gathering Lila into her arms despite her expanding belly. "I don't think anyone's going to be surprised." Afterward, they celebrated at Pike Place Market, wandering through the stalls and vendors like tourists in their own city. Sebastian bought flowers for his girls. Lila collected free samples with the dedication of a professional taste tester, and Clara felt her heart so full she thought it might burst. As the sun began to set over Elliott Bay, they made their way to the small cafe where Clara and Sebastian had shared their first official date, a awkward, wonderful dinner where they'd both been terrified of crossing the line from employer-employee to something infinitely more precious. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't hired me?" Clara asked, her hand resting on her belly as Sebastian helped her into a chair. "Never," Sebastian said immediately, "because I can't imagine any version of my life that doesn't include you." "Really? Not even a little bit curious?" Sebastian considered this, his fingers intertwining with hers across the small table. "You know what I think? I think some things are meant to happen. Destined, maybe. You walked into our lives exactly when we needed you most, and everything that came after, the friendship, the love, this family we've built, it all feels inevitable. Even the hard parts?" "Especially the hard parts," Sebastian said firmly. "They taught us that what we have is worth fighting for." Lila, who'd been coloring on her placemat with intense concentration, looked up suddenly. "Are you guys going to get all mushy again? Because I'm trying to eat." "Sorry, baby." Clara laughed, reaching over to smooth Lila's hair. "We'll try to contain ourselves." "Good, because I have something important to tell you." Lila set down her crayon and looked at both of them with serious eyes. "I wrote a story for school about families, and Mrs. Patterson wants me to read it at the assembly next week." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Sebastian said. "What's it about?" "It's about how families aren't just people who look the same or come from the same place," Lila said, her voice taking on the earnest tone she used for particularly important announcements. "It's about people who choose to love each other and take care of each other and stick together even when things get scary." Clara felt tears prick her eyes, happy tears, the kind that had become her default response to Lila's profound observations about life and love. "And the best part," Lila continued, "is that I get to tell everyone about how my mom was brave enough to love us even when other people said she shouldn't." The simple statement hit Clara with unexpected force. She thought about Vivian's envelope, about the resignation letter, about all the moments when she'd been tempted to run away from the love that seemed too good to be true. "I wasn't brave," Clara said softly. "I was terrified most of the time." "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," Lila replied with 8-year-old wisdom. "It means you do the right thing even when you are scared." Sebastian squeezed Clara's hand, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Our daughter," he said quietly, "is going to change the world." "Our daughter," Clara repeated, loving the way the words felt on her tongue. As they walked home through the twilight streets of Seattle, Lila skipping ahead while Sebastian and Clara followed at a more leisurely pace, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She thought about the scared young woman who'd answered Sebastian's advertisement 3.5 years ago, desperate for a job and a place to belong. She thought about the broken widower who'd hired her, not because she was the most qualified candidate, but because she was the only one who'd looked at Lila and seen a little girl who needed love, not just supervision. She thought about first steps and first words, sleepless nights and laughter-filled mornings, the gradual transformation of a house into a home. Most of all, she thought about love, the quiet, everyday kind that grew in the spaces between routine and responsibility, that flourished in the soil of shared meals and bedtime stories and small kindnesses offered without expectation of return. "Thank you," Clara said suddenly. Sebastian glanced at her, eyebrows raised. "For what?" "For seeing me, for choosing me, for teaching me that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real." Sebastian stopped walking, turning to face her completely. In the soft glow of the streetlights, he looked exactly like the man she'd fallen in love with. Strong, gentle, absolutely certain of his feelings. "Clara," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "you didn't just change my life. You saved it. You saved all of us." As if summoned by their conversation, Lila came running back to them, throwing her arms around both of them in an enthusiastic group hug that made Clara laugh despite the tears streaming down her face. "I love you guys," Lila announced. "All of you. Even baby brother, even though he's still cooking. We love you too, sweetheart," Clara said, her voice thick with happiness. "More than all the stars in the sky. More than all the fish in the sea," Sebastian added, continuing their family tradition. "More than all the pancakes in the world," Lila finished with a giggle. As they continued their walk home, Clara felt their son move restlessly under her heart, as if he couldn't wait to join the family that was already complete, but somehow still growing, still becoming something more beautiful with each passing day. She thought about the future that stretched ahead of them, sleepless nights with a newborn, Lila's school plays and soccer games, Sebastian's quiet strength as he navigated the challenges of expanding their business, the 1,000 small joys and sorrows that made up a life shared with the people you loved most. And for the first time in her life, Clara wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring, because she knew that whatever came, they would face it together, as a family. Now, as we close this beautiful chapter of their story, I want to ask you something that will stay with me long after these words fade. Have you ever been brave enough to choose love when everyone else told you to play it safe? Have you ever found your family in the most unexpected places? Love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the form of everyday kindness and shared responsibilities. Sometimes it grows slowly, taking root in the spaces between what we planned and what we actually need. Sebastian and Clara's story reminds us that the most powerful love isn't always the most dramatic. It's the love that shows up every day, that chooses commitment over convenience, that builds families from the ground up with patience and hope and unwavering dedication. What would you do if you found the love of your life in the last place you expected to look? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching.